So first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, coming at you with another episode of Pat's Daily, brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks. And today, I'm joined by good friend Alex Barth of 98.5 to talk some 53-man roster predictions following the conclusion of spring practices, which was OTAs and minicamp. Alex, before we get into it, buddy, how you doing? And tell the people, you got any fun plans for the break? Is it a break for you, or are you just going to keep grinding away, you crazy SOB?
I mean, it's a little bit of a break. I actually wrote like 2,000 words on that ridiculous Red Sox presser last night. If people want to check that out on 98.5sportsub.com.
Can you give people like me who are football obsessed, but not necessarily baseball obsessed, very few in Boston, what the hell is going on?
So basically, I mean, the long version, if we go back to 2020 or 2019, the Red Sox they won in 18. And part of the reason they won was they had this young core of Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts, and Rafael Devers. And that was supposed to be the future. That was supposed to be the next 10, 15 years. All three of those guys, I think, were under 25. They were all like perennial all-stars and all that. And then the Red Sox, because baseball doesn't have a salary cap, it does have a luxury tax.
Right.
The Red Sox, although the luxury tax penalties are not massive, the money's not massive, and you fall in the draft, but you don't lose draft picks. I mean, it's not my money saying that, but the Red Sox, after a disappointing 2019 season, there's some back and forth on this. Did Mookie Betts not want to be here? Did the Red Sox lowball him with their initial contract offers to the point that he wanted out? But they basically sold to the fans. Mookie Betts, who was the best of three players. We have to trade Mookie Betts because we can't keep all three. And if we trade Mookie Betts, we can keep Xander Bogaerts and Rafael Devers, and keeping two is greater than one. And people didn't buy it. They're a big market team. They should have been able to keep all three. They also traded Betts for a horrible return. One of the players they got back is no longer on the team. Another player they got back is no longer in the league. And the third player is their backup catcher, and he's having a horrible season. So, but they did that under the pitch of Xander Bogaerts and Rafael Devers will stay in Boston. We have to make this deal. Fast forward to last spring. The Red Sox lowball Xander Bogaerts. He leaves in free agency. As the team has gone through this, I mean, they've made one playoff appearance since winning it all in 2018. They went on a run in 2021. Bogaerts leaves 2 years later. Now it's all about Devers. And as they've sucked, they've accumulated draft picks, and some of those kids are starting to come up. So it's okay. Here we go. Rafi's now the veteran. They're starting to call up these prospects. But then, so Rafael Devers has been a third baseman his whole career. He's not great defensively. Unbelievable hitter. Top 10 hitter in baseball. Not great defensively. The Red Sox went out and signed Alex Bregman, who is a great player all around, but a Gold Glove caliber fielder. And he's third baseman. So they initially went to Devers, where Devers went to them when there were rumblings before he signed, said, hey, I'm a third baseman. What's going on? And they told him not to worry about it. It was nothing. Then they signed Bregman, and they told him, yeah, don't worry. He's going to play second. You're fine. Then they told him, we actually don't think you're a good fielder. You need a DH, which all of that rightfully pissed him off. And then when their first baseman got hurt in April, they went back to Devers and said, actually, we might need you to play first. And Devers put his foot down and said no, and said he wouldn't move. And that created a ton of tension between him and the GM. And there's already tension between the manager and GM. So it all led to him getting dumped for a bag of baseballs because they didn't want to pay a guy what they were paying him, even if it might have been worth it, because he was insubordinate. Nobody looks good here. The Red Sox look bad. Devers looks bad. Alex Cora looks bad. Craig Breslow looks bad. Sam Kennedy looks bad. It's an absolute mess for a team that hasn't been able to retain a franchise cornerstone kind of player beyond the age of 30, really since 2015, when they started all this BS by lowballing John Lester. The last Red Sox who left here, who played their prime here without also spending their prime elsewhere, were David Ortiz and Dustin Pedroia. That was 10 years ago now, and they even went year to year with Ortiz, which was not the right thing to do to him. So it's not that this trade is bad. It's a bad trade because they didn't get nearly enough, even if they had to trade him. But it's not that this trade is bad, but it's this long evolving pattern of superstars just not staying in Boston. Credit to Matt McCarthy from 98.5 The Sports Hub last night, who asked Sam Kennedy, the president of the team, point blank, why do you keep trading Hall of Fame players? And
what was the answer?
Kennedy's, it was basically count the rings. He said, we've had a lot of success over the last 24 years, which they have. And don't get me wrong, I'm eternally grateful for the success the Red Sox have had in my lifetime, especially in my childhood. But sports, Taylor, as we know, is a what have you done for me lately business. And frankly, they can get Bill Belichick, the greatest coach of all time, should be a little more scrutiny on some of the people running the Red Sox. Because yes, they've won 4 rings in the last 24 years. In the last 7, they have the 16th best win percentage in baseball. They have just 1 playoff appearance in the last 6 years. That's the lowest in the AL East, and it puts them in company with teams like the Detroit Tigers, the Los Angeles Angels, the Seattle Mariners, the Washington Nationals, the Pittsburgh Pirates, Chicago Cubs, Cincinnati Reds, and Colorado Rockies. Those are all laughingstock franchises, and the Red Sox have either as many or 1 more playoff appearances they do in the last 6, soon going to be 7 years.
That's like if Bill or Robert Kraft had just shown no contrition after the complete dumpster fire. Like, I think they did a pretty good job of acknowledging, like, yeah, this isn't good, and I definitely have a hand in it, even if there was some blame pushed around. But basically saying kiss the rings when you put your franchise in that bad of a position over years and years is wild in this city.
So if it June Lee from Yahoo, who does a fantastic job, he had a great piece yesterday on, you know how usually with the Patriots we get that end of season, this is what was going on behind the scenes.
Doug.
Yeah, which is always a great read. So June Lee did a little bit of that, but it's with the Red Sox the last few years. It's mainly the last few months, but he gets into some other stuff from previous years. And I would not be surprised if one of the talking points today is the current Red Sox versus last year's Patriots, because there's some through lines there.
How so? Real quick, because we've already gone almost 10 minutes.
Yeah. No, and people don't want to relive the Gerard Mayo era, but just some of the dysfunction, the politics of it. Like, all right, here's a quick one. The coaching staff and front office disagree on certain areas of player development, just based on what areas you're focusing on. And one of those is fielding, and the top prospect in baseball, Roman Anfernee, got called up, I think last week, 2 weeks ago, and made an error on the first play. And the coaching staff feels like fielding, this is all according to June Lee, the coaching staff feels like the fielding techniques aren't being taught properly at the minor league level. So maybe by accident, maybe sending a signal, usually they'll do some coaching stuff on the field before the game, but this is like at noon before anybody's in the ballpark for a 7:00 game. Instead, around 5:00, when the cameras start to roll in and film the players warming up, there's Roman Anfernee, the number 1 player in baseball, doing very basic ground ball fielding drills, like stuff you do in Little League. And June Lee's theory, and is it a theory or a theory, is basically like the coaches wanted the front office to see that, but okay, you're taking the number 1 prospect in baseball, which think like number 1 draft pick, and you're parading him in front of the cameras that he doesn't know how to do something basic just to prove a point.
That's dirty.
It's not a great look.
Okay, well, that was fascinating. We got to move on, because if I ask another question, I feel like we will continue into
I'll
this.
fill you in off the air.
Thank you, brother. But Red Sox, figure it out. But it seems like the Patriots are starting to figure it out slowly but surely. Some pretty significant turnaround in Foxborough. So, Alex, you and I are going to go through the roster and give our 53-man predictions. Let's start off at quarterback. Now, also, we have to give the caveat of this is spring practices. There's only so much you can learn about a lot of these positions, specifically running back, linebacker, defensive line, positions where you can't really do a lot because there's not a lot of physicality. Mike Vrabel calls it like a passing camp. So everything we say has to be taken with an appropriate grain of salt, like defensive backs can't play through receivers when they're contesting. Pass rushers almost always know what's going to happen. So I just want to set that really quickly. But with that said, let's start with quarterbacks. I don't think there's going to be any big surprises, but who do you have making the team? And also, what were your overall takeaways from that group this spring?
Yeah, so I think, sorry, you said quarterbacks, you cut out there.
Yeah, quarterbacks. I'm sorry. Who do you have making the roster at quarterback, and what do you think of that group?
Yeah, just the 2, Josh Dobbs and I'm reading off my roster projection, which is alphabetical, so don't read into any of this as a depth chart. As I said, Josh Dobbs and Drake May, I kind of realized that's not the right order. But Drake May and Josh Dobbs, I think Drake May, it's going to be, as we've talked about, it's going to be a learning process picking up Josh McDaniels' offense. I think he made progress this summer. I think there's still a lot more progress he needs to make. I don't think he's behind. It's just there's a lot that he's going to do in training camp, right? So, so far so good, but got a long way to go with him. Dobbs made some sneaky nice throws this spring. He had some not so sneaky bad interceptions, but he made some sneaky nice throws. There were some like Brian Hoyer training camp vibes in there, not entirely. You know how high a regard I hold training camp Brian Hoyer.
I see.
But yeah, not, he's not Joe Milton. I still think Joe Milton would have been the better backup just in terms of overall ability.
Don't start that, Alex.
But Dobbs, he made some nice throws. I think you see definitely the leadership tangent come through with him, and I think that's something that they really cared about. I wanted Ben Woolridge to make things interesting and be like, are they going to keep a third quarterback for that emergency QB thing? As much as I love the ghost reps, I just don't quite think he got there. But he could be on the practice squad and be the third quarterback. Maybe they bring in competition before the start of camp. That wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think Woolridge did enough to make it a conversation here.
Yeah, I think he really just is like a camp arm, like a Trace McSorley, where if he shows you something, then maybe it's something to talk about. But, aside from maybe a couple good throws, it's about what you would have expected. But Drake May, I agree. I think overall it was a positive camp for him for sure, but it was back and forth, and that's against a veteran defense with a whole lot of talent. So that's nothing to scoff at. The accuracy was a bit sporadic. I'd like to see that kind of tie together. But with Drake May, I think that's just going to be part of the experience. Most of the time, he's going to do what he should, and every once in a while, he's going to make you go, what the hell was that? But, you'll take most of the good with some of the bad. There were also times where he held on to the football. Impossible for us to know why exactly that happened on a snap-to-snap basis. When I asked Mike Vrabel about it in the red zone specifically, he mentioned, there are times where it's a three-man rush, and you kind of like your quarterback to take his time knowing he has it. But there's also times where you'd probably like him to get the ball out earlier. But also, is that receiver separation? Is that him holding onto the ball? I'll say I didn't think he looked skittish. I think he looked comfortable going through his reads, but maybe just times where he was gun shy for one reason or another. But I think it was a positive camp for him overall. You saw that he didn't put the ball in harm's way. For the most part, the accuracy was good. Like you say, Joshua Dobbs, his whole thing when I looked at the tape was the scrambles and those throws down the seam, because that man will rip it, and he will to his detriment at times. Worst throw he had in the spring was the pick six to Isaiah Bolden that was late and just a really bad decision. But still, you don't want him playing, but the mentorship and the experience kind of in this Mike Vrabel-esque team he brings. And then, like you said, Woolridge didn't do anything to really sway you one way or another. Now, running back, different part of the backfield. Who do you have making it? Do you think they're going to keep 4? Do you think they're just going to stick with 3? How do you see this position group shaking out? And are there any dark horses for you?
So I know people, excuse me. I know people have pointed out like Mike Vrabel traditionally kept 3 in Tennessee. And I'm not saying there's nothing to read into that, but Josh McDaniels regularly kept 4. So I think that it'll be interesting to kind of see how much control does McDaniels have when he goes to Vrabel's like, these are the guys I want on the roster, right? Or Vrabel and Wolf, I should say. I had 4. I had Gibson, Henderson, Larison, and Stevenson. There's a projection there. I don't know that Larison really blew us away in the spring. Like, it wasn't bad, but I don't know that he really blew us away like you look at a UDFA too. But that's just such a Josh McDaniels running back room where you have Stevenson as the early down guy, Henderson as the passing down guy, and then you kind of have Larison and Gibson as the backups for both spots. And then what puts Larison over the top to me is I just believe he's going to be a really good special teams player. I think he has the build, the physicality, the strength, and the mindset for it. So I've done this before. I've compared him to Brandon Bolden, where Brandon Bolden was the 4th running back, but he was kind of at least, and there were times where he was a regular part of the running game. You look at 2021, when James White got hurt, he fully stepped into that role, but there were years where he would carry the ball maybe 5 times. So I think they don't have a ton of guys right now that project as core special teamers. Obviously they have Brandon Schooler, but they have fewer of those guys than they've had. So if you're not going to have any of those guys, like, you need guys who can primarily play in the kicking game. If Larison can do that, and he's going to give you some added running back depth, I just think it makes too much sense. I think it makes too much sense not to keep him. Now, if we go out there in the summer and he's not super involved in special teams, I'm going to rethink this because we didn't see a ton of special team stuff this spring. We a little bit, and he was out there for that, but it's not enough for me to feel comfortable definitively saying like, yeah, he's part of their core special teams plan, or he's not part of their core special teams plan. But I know everybody wants to compare him to Rex Burkhead, and look, Burkhead and Bolden were similar players. I think people don't realize how big he is. And Bolden was a big guy, and that's the first pushback I always get. Larison's a big guy. He's like 6'1", 215, something like that. So, or maybe that's Bolden, but he's right in that ballpark. So I think he sticks. I think he sticks mainly in a special teams role for now, and maybe he grows into a bigger role, but I think he sticks.
6'209", so he definitely is bigger than I think you'd probably expect just watching him.
And Bolden was 5'11", 215.
Yeah, Bolden was a brick house. We've talked about this on the crossover. Like, I do think that Bolden is more of like a banger where he can live between the tackles a little bit more, but I also see their roles being similar. And like Burkhead, where a lot of his contributions were on special teams, but he could carry the ball. He wasn't just a third down back, especially if he's got a lead blocker. You get him up to the second level, that's where he gets really slippery, and he has the receiving ability. But with Larison, if he didn't have that catch he had with the wheel, Cam Riley right on his hip, if it weren't for that, I would say that I was a bit disappointed. He was regularly an outlet for the backup quarterbacks, but for a guy who was so productive and so versatile in college, didn't quite see that in the spring. Maybe that's because of opportunities as well. So TBD, I do have him making the roster alongside Antonio Gibson, Travion Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson. I think Mondre is going to continue to be the bell cow of this group, but for the first time since he was a rookie, he doesn't have to carry the group, which will be very nice. Right. And if the fumbleitis does continue, you at least now have other options. You don't have to rely on him. Antonio Gibson, I like his role better, even more. I like his role even more now because, you know, he's a bit inconsistent. Where last year he admitted he kind of needed to lock in at some point, and then you saw there were the flashes, but he also had issues protecting the ball. Blitz recognition was inconsistent, so you don't have to rely on him. But Travion Henderson, he gives you the blitz pickup, he gives you the ball security, and he gives you a home run threat as well. So I really like the depth that they're going to have back there. Terrell Jennings and Travion Williams really haven't stood out significantly. With Williams, I'd actually say later in minicamp, he actually stood out for bad reasons. There were a couple plays where I know linebackers were right on him and he wasn't able to haul in some targets. So that room, I don't think there's too many surprises. You have any final thoughts there?
I would just say, I think, you know, people ask who the starting running back is going to be. It's not the point. Like, you can start and then have 5 snaps at running back. I think, and even beyond that, like, who's going to get the most snaps? I think it's going to be Stevenson. Yeah. But who is going to get the high leverage snaps, right? Third down, red zone, 2-minute drill. I think that's going to be Henderson. So he might only get 45% of the snaps. They feel like a lot because he's going to be in the game in big moments. And Travion Henderson is one of those pure special teams guys. If he makes the team, it's solely in kick. Like, not even like Larison. Like, it's solely in kick.
Williams?
Yeah, Williams.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, wide receiver. I feel like this is where it's probably going to get a little bit more interesting. Who do you have? How many do you have actually making it first?
I have 7.
Okay, I have 7 too.
I kind of have 8, honestly.
Okay,
so I have Bourne, Booty, Chisholm, Diggs, Douglas, Hollins, Williams. I left off the 2 draft picks from last year, but I have Polk starting on IR because
okay,
he's coming back from that shoulder. They have that ability now where they can place a guy on IR, you know, before roster cuts and designate him a return. So if Polk needs more time coming back, that way you don't lose him. Maybe he doesn't end up getting returned. Maybe it's a Foxborough flu year, but I just think there's so much uncertainty with this group. Yeah. Bourne's 30 years old, 2 years removed from a knee injury. I'm just going the order that I have them written down here. Efton Chisholm is a UDFA, right? Diggs is coming off a torn ACL. He's on the wrong side of 30. Demario Douglas is a really good player. He's going to be a great fit in this offense, but he struggled to stay healthy. And Kyle Williams is a rookie. So the only guys that really skipped there are Kayshawn Booty and Mac Hollins, who I think have less variance, but are low ceiling players. Those are, you know, 4th or 5th wide receivers. So 7's a lot, but it's not like they have all this talent at other positions that prevents them from doing that. And why not let this play out into the season and kind of get a better idea of where guys are at? I don't think they keep 7. So because this is week 1, right? I don't think they would keep 7 for all 18 weeks. I think it would get whittled down over time as, you know, guys return from IR, they make other roster moves or whatever. Not all 7 are going to be active on game day. But this will probably get sorted out in camp. I don't think I'll ultimately have 7 on my last roster projection, but I'm not ready to cut anybody yet because they all have a case. And they could do that going into the season and then kind of see, all right, well, let's see what Efton Chisholm looks like, right? Is he legit, or is he Riley McCarron, who had a great camp, and then it was so clear in his first game that he wasn't ready that nobody ever heard from him again? So I'm not saying that Efton Chisholm is going to be that, but like you can kind of figure that out. So 7, there you go.
I think 7 makes sense for a group that, like you said, does have a lot of uncertainty. Now, for my roster, I have Demario Douglas after a really good spring. And again, there's the grain of salt, but also we know what Pop is at this point, and it feels like the only question marks were how is he going to fit with the option routes in this offense and the mental side. Sounds like he's done great, so I think that he's in for a true breakout season. Stephon Diggs, of course, at this point, I'd be surprised if he didn't play week 1, considering he's been participating in slower pace drills and is way ahead of anywhere that Kendrick Bourne was during the entire offseason program in a similar position last year. Then Kyle Williams, of course, is a lock. Kayshon Boutte, I have him making the roster, but it's really by default because he's the top X receiver. We've seen Kyle Williams mix in, but if Kyle Williams has a great summer and he and Drake may have some kind of rapport, I could see Kayshon Boutte not being on the team. Because for all the talk about, why is anybody talking about Kayshon Boutte? And, he caught all the go balls last year. The only times I remember him making an impact during drills were on curl routes. It's not like the impact that I think fans thought he was going to make is not what we saw in spring during a passing camp. Guy who it's made out that Drake May had such a rapport with him. Like, he definitely had his moments, but the inconsistency is why Kayshon Boutte kind of fell out of favor with some of us. And we really didn't have any reason to think that he would make it outside of strictly being the only guy who plays that X spot. And he's not even a great fit for it. So I kind of have him on the fringe, but making it again as a default. Kendrick Bourne, I think, only makes it if Matt Collins isn't healthy. I think as that kind of early down Z where I could see Bourne and Diggs kind of rotating depending on the situation, I think Collins is the guy they want on the field on early downs to be that run blocker and that tone setter. So as soon as he's back, that's when I think Kendrick Bourne's spot is in serious jeopardy. I have Jalen Polk making it only because, like Diggs, he was participating at least. So it feels like maybe the jersey's a precaution, but they do want to start getting him involved to ramp him up for the summer. And I think I keep seeing him off people's rosters. This is a guy who was a second-round pick last year in a position group with no bona fide studs. Like, Demario Douglas is the only guy where for the next couple of years you could see him being a significant contributor on this team. Why are we so quick to get rid of Jalen Polk? I know last season was bad. I think he's got more upside than most people at this spot. I think he's done everything that's asked of him so far. Like, if he's seen behind, like, mentally, obviously he's hurt, but he's done what he can. So I don't really see so far why he should be on the outside looking in. Strictly outside of the injury, but if anything, I think he lands on a list. I don't see them cutting him outright. And then last one, I've also got Efton Chisholm making it. Was really productive. The backups love him. I think that's a good way to get your foot in the door for this roster. And he made the most of his opportunities with Drake May. So I think Efton Chisholm has a good spot. And then the rest of the list, John Giles, practice squad. He's got the size and he looks the part, doesn't always play the part. Javon Baker, he's not inconsistent or I think technically refined enough to really be a guy to stand out here. X, like we've said, is desperate. So maybe he sneaks on, but I can't see it right now with him. And that's how I see the position. Again, Jalen Polk, I think, has a much better chance of making this team than Javon Baker, despite I think Baker having more talent.
So just on Polk, why are people leaving him off, right? And I think a lot of the points you made usually are correct, right? He was just a second round pick. He's hurt. You can't, all of that, right? And usually, yeah, that would mean you're not going to cut a guy a year after making him a second round pick. I think the way that Vrabel has taken a hatchet to this roster this offseason, this specific situation, that it doesn't feel like that stuff maybe applies the way it usually would. So, like, you're on the right track with that. I just wonder, well, if you're going to just outright cut, and I mean, these are older players, but just the idea of where you're at with the roster, you're going to outright cut guys like David Andrews, like Joe Cardona, like Juwan Bentley, guys
younger,
that can
cheaper.
still
Remember,
play.
younger, cheaper. Very different.
Younger, cheaper. But if you're going to, I mean, do you think Javon Baker got a real look this spring? Do you think Javon Baker got a real shot to prove what he can do this spring?
I mean, he got reps with Drake. I think he did. I think that he
not
was
a ton.
But a ton, but I don't think he deserved them either. Like, I don't think Baker's the kind of guy. He was also a 4th round pick. Like, I think a second rounder who was
it's very different.
Until 1 year where he was a complete outlier. Like, Baker, you knew was a risk. Polk, being as bad as he was last year, came out of nowhere. And I think even seeing him like with Diggs with Drake. Like Polk seems like he's being given those opportunities, unlike a Baker, who I don't think has earned them or really is in a position where he should be getting them.
There's some younger guys that got downplayed too, I think, this spring, like Marte Mapu, even a guy like Ben Brown, things like I don't think they're
while, Ben Brown's a veteran.
Ben Brown's only been in the league, I think, for 2 years.
No, he's been in the league for like 4 years.
He's been on like five. He's been on like 5 teams.
Yeah, wait, let's see.
But I'm pulling it up if I can not get the picture.
I feel like Tyrese Robinson have sneakily been in the league for a while. They just didn't play.
Ben Brown has been in the league since 22. So last year was his 3rd season.
Okay, yeah. That's longer than I think people think. Because I thought when he first got here, I thought he was an undrafted rookie. And I was like, oh shit, he's 27 years old.
I'm not those traditional roster constraints like, oh, well, this guy was just this pick. I'm not ruling that out with them. Just the way that they've stressed overhauling the roster. I mean, it's similar to Duke Dawson. Now, Duke Dawson was hurt too. Duke Dawson struggled as a rookie, dealt with injuries, couldn't get on the same page, and then they traded him. I think after camp, his 2nd year. So there is some now. Obviously, I don't know how many people who made that move are still in the building, but there is some precedent there.
I get that. And I understand the regime thing. It's just, I think Polk is usually I would agree, but I think Polk is in a very unique position where everything really was working against him. Like, this is a guy where Alex Katzen, who covered him with Washington, mentioned how this is a guy who, like, if he does get in his head, and maybe that's a bad sign for his future, I will acknowledge that. If he's a guy where if he gets in his head, he's going to get into a slump, like, that's not really going to fly in the NFL. But I would just like to see him now with the new regime, with better coaching, with a guy like Diggs and Mac Hollins, where if he does get down, like we've seen him working with Diggs and Hollins in a way I haven't seen with Baker. I think that's another significant part of this too, is Polk has looked like he's really trying to get up to speed. Whereas can you say that with Baker? I can't.
No.
I haven't seen that for Baker. And that's really the biggest thing. I don't want to get stuck on this, but it's an interesting, at least, I think it is an interesting discussion around Jalen Polk. All right, tight end. This one's going to be quick. Who you got?
I have Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, and then Brock Lampy at fullback.
No CJ Dupree, no Jack Westover.
No, I think from what we saw in the spring, you can get any of those guys on the practice squad. Like, I think those guys, you're not going to keep 4 tight ends on the practice squad, but you keep 1 or 2, and then you kind of elevate as needed, and then eventually, like a roster, it'll work itself out. A roster spot will open up, and maybe in October you fully add whoever stands out at that 3rd tight end, whether it's Dupree, whether it's Westover, whether it's Jaheim Bell, G. Scott. But I just think they don't need to keep that guy on the roster. They can keep him on the practice squad and elevate him. I don't know that any of those guys showed in the spring that they deserve a roster spot.
I get that. And I did not like the depth that I saw, at least receiving wise. But I do think that once the pads come on, that's when this group will shine. I put CJ Dupree on because of the signing bonus and the guarantees that he got as an undrafted free agent. I think those are significant. And I think he is a good blocker. And the fact that like Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry are on the older side, and we do know that McDaniels is open to rostering 4 tight ends because he keeps that fullback. I also have Brock Lampy making it. I really just have those guys because Lampy, there is no pure fullback on the roster. And I think Dupree has the edge over Westover because he was brought in by this regime, and Westover, I don't think, made the most of his opportunities. And I don't think he's as good of a run blocker. So I've got 4 tight ends. You've got 3. Now, closing up the offense, let's talk the line. How many guys do you have, and who is making it on your roster projection?
I have, so this is another one where I kind of loaded up a little bit. I have 9. I thought I had 10. I have 9 at tackle. I have Will Campbell, Morgan Moses, and Cade Wallace. Michael Onwenu, Sidiso, and Cole Strange at guard. Garrett Bradbury and Jared Wilson at center. And then I have Jack Connolly as a kind of hybrid tackle guard. Marcus Bryant was my 55th player. He just missed. But I think that Connolly can play some left tackle for you. And if something happened to Campbell, Marcus Bryant's the guy you get on the practice squad and then get right back up and get on the roster. But he's squarely in the mix. I think the key here is that Connolly can play 3 or 4 positions. Marcus Bryant can play 2. Caden Wallace can probably play a couple. Demontre Jacobs only playing right tackle. Fedarian Lowe's only playing left tackle. And as a backup,
played left as well. Trace played left. I think he's a natural left tackle, actually.
From
I
what I
don't
remember
like
last
him there,
year.
but he can. I don't like him there. But he
Right.
can.
From what I remember last year, even at a backup level, I don't know about putting him on the left side. So
Right.
it's just so hard to compete for backup role when you're a one position player, especially when you're a one position tackle. And then when you have Marcus Bryant, who's a true swing tackle, when you have Caden Wallace, who can play right tackle and kick inside to guard, or you have Jack Connolly, who can maybe play everywhere. Like, we have to see if Connolly really has the ability. But just the fact that they were playing him as much as they were in as many places as they were in the spring told me like they might have plans for this kid. So that's how I get to 9. I wanted to keep Marcus Bryant. I really did. That was a tough cut. That was one of my last cuts. It came down to him and Connolly. I didn't think I could keep 10 linemen.
That's fair. This was a tough group, honestly. So Will Campbell, Mike Nwenu, Morgan Moses, Garrett Bradbury, Cole Strange. Those are pretty obvious because that's right now the starting offensive line. I have Marcus Bryant making it, and really that's because I gave him deference as a draft pick and a guy who could play left and right tackle. Also because I think Caden Wallace is probably going to be more involved in the guard competition. I have him making it as well. Part of it is pedigree, 3rd-round pick. He's a talented player. I had him making it over Trey Jacobs as well. I think Trey's a guy who you could get on the practice squad if you needed to, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they kept Jacobs because he's been one of the top backup tackles. He's, along with Conley and Will Campbell, is consistently working with Morgan Moses after practice. I don't think that's nothing. I think this is a pretty significant backup tackle battle. So I think those extra reps and just experience from a guy who's been in the league so long are going to be helpful. I've also got Jack Connolly. When they split off into groups, the first team and the primary backups on the second team, not always strictly indicative, but Connolly is with the starting offense as a guy who usually mixes in that group. And the fact that he's got the Doug Marrone connection, he's got the 4-position versatility, at least the experience of playing a lot of different spots inside out. I think it's going to be very hard for anybody to beat him, especially also he's cheap and he looks the part too. He's an NFL caliber player size-wise. And then a sneaky one, I tried to find a way to keep City, but because of Caden, I just couldn't find a way to do it. And this is a guy where I think I could see them flipping. I have Ben Brown only because I think Jared Wilson maybe starts on PUP or something like that. The guys who we didn't see participate in any of even the slower pace drills, I kind of just defaulted to them starting on some kind of injury list. But if there's no Jared Wilson and we haven't really seen Cole Strange snap, I think that it does make sense to roster another guy who you know has experience with Drake May and is at least a consistent center. But if Jared Wilson's healthy, then I could maybe see City Stowe making it instead of him. But I just didn't feel comfortable not having another guy with NFL center experience in more than like 2 games being on the roster.
Fair enough.
And then Layden Robinson, I have to acknowledge, I don't know what's up with him, but that's been a massive disappointment. I thought he was going to be right in the starting mix or at least a competition, and he is buried on the depth chart right now.
And it doesn't seem like he's hurt. Like, he's not doing any rehab stuff. He's just not with the top offense or even with the backup offense.
And that's the thing. You usually see some guys mix in where you're like, okay, they're looking at it. But like when Tyrese Robinson is in the mix, a guy who should not be starting in the NFL, and Layden Robinson, who played decently at times, is consistently with the threes, that's a problem.
He's not even the number 1 Robinson on the depth chart.
Even the number 1 Robinson. That tells you everything you need to know. All right, we're going to move on to the defense. But first, quick word from our friends at Prize Picks. Be right back.
Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less and at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. There's only 1 series left in the playoffs, and the championship is officially on the line. That means time is running out for you to put your final takes to the test on Prize Picks, the best place to cash in with your favorite sports. And Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this basketball season, this championship season. Which players are going to go off in the postseason? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports takes into real money all season long on Prize Picks. So in the finals, is Halliburton going to have more than 20 points? Is SGA going to have less than 12 assists? More or less, make your picks on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game.
All right, we're back, Alex. Moving on to the defense. Let's start with the defensive line. I've got the same number on the defensive line as the offensive line. How about you?
I actually included edge this year. I usually don't. I'm usually very anti that, but because Madden's including it in the positions this year, they finally caught up to that, as well as long snapper. So my like true defensive linemen, I have 5. I have Christian Barmore, Joshua Farmer, Jeremiah Farms, Kyrus Tonga, and Milton Williams. Jaquelin Roy just off the roster, and then Wilfred Pinay sticks around on the practice squad as an IPP player.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So for those guys, I've got Barmore, Milton Williams. So I got you include your edges actually because I included edge and interior guys.
Okay. Caleb on Chason, Anfernee Jennings, Harold Landry, Braden Swinson, Keon White.
Okay, so Anfernee Jennings is a bit of a surprise for me. So I've got Christian Barmore, Milton Williams, Keon White, Harold Landry, Joshua Farmer, Braden Swinson, Caleb on Chason, Kyrus Tonga, and Jeremiah Farms. I cut Anfernee Jennings, and then the other guys I don't think are very surprising. Jaquelin Roy just hasn't played. I think he could make the roster if he has a good summer. But right now, Kyrus Tonga is a guy they signed. He clearly has the inside track. Although I obviously like Jaquelin Roy as a player. But Anfernee Jennings, I had him off because he has only really worked across from Truman Jones, which I do not like as a guy who I thought could maybe rotate on early downs and had a leg up on Caleb on Chason. Caleb on Chason, though, has been rotating very heavily with Harold Landry, which I didn't expect. So I don't really see how Jennings makes this team. It seems like they want Keon and Landry as the early down guys. But what was your logic there?
He's just a good football player. That's really it. As simple as that sounds, like they were putting him out there with the second team, and he was dominating when he was out there. Like, and yeah, it was against second team. It looked like a starter going up against the second team. He looked a level above them. And I think at a certain point where this roster's at, you have to keep good football players. And he's going to make it too tough for them to cut him because he's going to be too good. And it's not like Layden Robinson where he's not involved at all. He's just involved less. Maybe they trade him. Maybe the ultimate answer there is they trade him. Like, I'm not ruling that out, but I had him on my bubble. I had him as my 53rd player. Or no, I had him, I think it's my 51st. I had him as my 51st player. But he's a good football player. And they can't part ways with good football players. They can't be doing that right now. And I think they know that. So, Taylor, I talk about this every year, the at-large roster spots, right? You're going to keep, a base number of guys at each position. And then it's just who are the best players remaining. Even once they've kept edge guys they want to keep. When you get to that next group where it's just best players available, I mean, that's going to be Efton Chisholm, Brock Lampy, Kayshawn Booty, Kendrick Bourne, Jack Connolly, Marcus Bryant, Del Pettis, Marcellus Dial, Marte Mapu, right? That group. How are you going to tell me you're not keeping Anfernee Jennings from that group? I'll believe it when I see it.
Anfernee Jennings.
I'd rather have him and not need him than need him and not have him, kind of thing.
He's one of my favorite players on this football team. I love me some Anfernee Jennings. I'm willing to tolerate the fact that he is an average pass rusher. I just haven't seen it use-wise. I think this is a team that's going to value pass rush more than run defense, and he is an elite run stopper. But Harold Landry was also an elite run stopper last year. Keon White has shown that he can be a top-tier run stopper, and both guys are better edge rushers. And I think Caleb on Chason is a good enough edge setter that it would justify rostering him over Jennings. I just don't know where you play Jennings. That's really the biggest thing. Is okay, maybe he plays early downs. You're taking Keon White off the field for Jennings. You're taking Harold Landry, who you're paying a ton of money to already be what looks like a rotational player. If Jennings became the player I thought he was going to be out of college and also had off-ball versatility, I think very differently. I'd say, okay, he's taken Jelani Tabai's spot. But if anything, I think that's Jelani Tabai's role, the guy who has versatility and isn't a great pass rusher, but gives you that run defense. He's not nearly as good as Anfernee Jennings. It's just, as much as I like Jennings, I just don't see how he fits in this group with so many better pass rushers, plus Braden Swinson. I'd even honestly take Elijah Ponder because I think his upside as a pass rusher is greater than what you get from Anfernee Jennings. And it pains me to say that, but as soon as Landry was signed, I started to feel a little iffy about Jennings' roster security, and that really what we saw in camp has only reinforced that for me, unfortunately. But linebacker, who do you have, including newly minted linebacker Marte Mapu, no longer a safety, which I know is music to your ears.
Yeah, I almost put him on. So I think there's 3 guys that are essentially locks: Christian Ellis, Jack Gibbons, and Robert Spillane. And then I have Jelani Tavai. I thought he was going to be one of the first guys gone when they hired Vrabel, but he's still here, and that tells me he's here for a reason. I think there is value in having, with them getting more athletic but smaller at linebacker, I think there's value in still having one guy that can fly downhill in 250 pounds and plug a hole. You may hear that and say, well, why didn't they just have Bentley do it? This is a pretty niche role. You're probably talking about 30% usage rate and then heavy use on special teams. Asking a guy who was a team captain to step down to that role, and maybe they did ask him, he said no, but like asking a guy who was a team captain, playing 90-something% of the snaps to step down to that is a tough look versus a guy like Tavai, who probably is more suited for that role to begin with, and can play some on the edge and help set the edge against the run. You know, it was really him versus Marte Mapu for that last spot. And it was, do they want more of what they have or do they want something different? And again, I just think Tavai being here is here for a reason. He'll play in and short situations. He'll play on the goal line. He'll just be a battering ram against the run. You know, people talk about their linebacker depth and it could be better, but like if Christian Ellis goes down, you're not plugging Jelani Tavai in because he doesn't do the same things that Ellis does. It's its own thing. If that's what they want, then it's Marte Mapu. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if they just want that one run stopper because they have gotten so small up front.
I've got Mapu making it over Tavai, but that's really because I think Jack Gibbons can be kind of that run stopper guy next to Robert Spillane. Like we've seen him do it in this Titans defense. If Tavai hadn't gotten hurt, I probably would have kept him on, but depending on how long he's out, I do think that could hurt his ability to make the team. That said, I'm not super. So I have Robert Spillane, I have Jack Gibbons, I have Christian Ellis, and I have Marte Mapu. I could also see Mapu losing his job and it going to Cam Riley, to be totally honest, because Cam Riley showed up a few times in camp. This just seems like a linebacker group that's well coached, that really just understands how to play in this defense. And I think that I wouldn't be surprised if they keep a guy who could contribute on special teams, maybe develop into something more in their system. And with Mapu just missing so much time, the only reason I put him on was the pedigree, the fact that Vrabel said he likes his size, he likes what he can do as a blitzer. There's a way to see how Marte Mapu's skill set could be used if you put him in a more concentrated role. But also, again, I think that fourth spot is completely up for grabs. I think Gibbons is like a high-end backup / special teamer. Christian Ellis is your coverage guy. Maybe he's got some early down upside. And Spillane is a good group, but, you know, somebody else could maybe rock the boat at the end of that depth chart. All right, moving on to cornerback. Who do you have making the team?
I have 6 corners. This is another position where I went deep. Alex Austin, Isaiah Bolden, Carlton Davis, Marcelo Style, Christian Gonzalez, and Marcus Jones.
Same here.
Yeah, I just think Austin's going to be their kind of ultimate backup. He's going to be the third boundary corner, second in the slot. And then I think Dial and Bolden make it mainly for special teams reasons. They might mix in a corner, but Dial was a core special teamer last year. Like I mentioned, they don't have a ton of those guys on their roster right now, or it doesn't look like they do. And then they were finally letting Bolden get a chance to return some kicks. So if he can do that, that they have the roster flexibility right now to keep 6 corners. If a couple of those guys are going to make big time plays on special teams. He was one of my last guys on, but I had him on.
I was a little bit iffy on Bolden because, like, he had the pick 6. To be honest, that was more of a bad decision than a good play. He threw it right to Bolden, and then he did have a breakup. But I feel like Bolden's always been a little bit more flash than substance. We always talk about him as the kick returner, as that guy who's got all the size, and maybe he emerges as a corner. And it just feels like we've gotten to the point where, all right, I just have to see more because the legend of Isaiah Bolden is greater than what we've seen professionally. That said, he's never actually been used as a kick returner, which is so bizarre considering he was one of the best in college his last year at Jackson State. So I think that really is his role to making this team and maybe stepping up on special teams as well. But other than that, yeah, I'm on the same page. Marcelo Style played inside and out when they were kind of short on corners. Seems like he's right behind Alex Austin. So that group kind of speaks for itself. Miles Battle got hurt. But he actually was playing pretty well. I think he's a practice squad candidate. Kobe Minor, they drafted. I haven't noticed him or really in any of the other guys at that position. Safety, though. How many guys do you have making the team? I currently have, I don't count Schooler as a safety, so I have 4.
I count him as a safety. I have 5.
Okay. So basically the same. Yeah.
Duggar, Hawkins, Peppers, Schooler, and Woodson. Del Pettis was my 54th player.
Okay. That makes sense. I had Jabril Peppers, Jalen Hawkins, Craig Woodson, and Del Pettis. Now, do you think Duggar starts the season?
I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think so, considering the injury wasn't that bad to the point where he was playing through it last year, but maybe he shouldn't have been playing through it. Yeah, if he doesn't, it opens up a spot for Pettis. I wanted to keep Pettis. I still think Pettis can sneak on. Again, 7 wide receivers probably isn't going to stick, so he'd be that next guy put on the roster. But yeah, if Duggar doesn't make it, then if Duggar's not ready to start season, I definitely think Pettis is the guy.
Yeah, Marcus Epps was kind of tough just because if there's no Duggar, they might want more veterans. But I think that Craig Woodson is going to get that third safety job. I don't think he's going to let go. I think Jalen Hawkins benefits from no Kyle Duggar because he's been consistently in the mix with that top group. So Peppers and Jalen Hawkins probably your starting duo if there's no Duggar, and then Craig Woodson. If Duggar comes back, I think Woodson kind of maybe bumps over Hawkins, but I think it would take a strong summer. And yeah, Pettis, it seems like he's taking a step forward in his progression, like communication-wise. Saw more on the back end. I think he looks a little bit better, and his special teams role, I think, is significant. Now let's wrap it up with special teams. Another one I don't think is going to take too long. Who do you have making it? Parker Romo? Or Andres?
No, Borgalis, Behringer, and Ashby.
Yeah, that was really. And then for me, I also threw Brendan Schooler in there. He has been working at safety, like with the top, when they split off in the fields, he's usually that top backup, but hopefully you only see him on special teams. But most part, man, we're on the same page. That was fun. Now, before I let you get out of here, because I've already kept you for a while, please remind the people where they can find you, what great stuff you got coming down the pipeline that we should be looking out for.
Yep, 985thesportshub.com. You can find the full roster projection there. Also, Patriots Beat podcast. Me and Brian did one yesterday. We'll do one tomorrow that I think might be similar to this, but we'll do one tomorrow. And new Catch 22 coming tomorrow as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
And you can read my Red Sox thoughts too, 985thesportshub.com.
Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed our 10 minutes before the show where we dug into it. I certainly learned a lot, and thank you, buddy, once again for coming on. And thank you all, as always, for watching. Now, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. We will see you next time. Peace, y'all.